dress bodice has 4 pieces, 2 for the front and 2 for the back. Although this dress pattern does not have a lining, I'm going to go ahead and include one in mine. I'll cut 1 set for the dress and 1 set for the lining. Let's start with the front pattern pieces. The center front panel has 2 bust darts. Fold the darts in half and pin. Stitch the darts and remove your pins as you're sewing. Press the darts upwards. Place right sides together at a diagonal where it's almost at a 30-degree angle and begin pinning. You'll notice a curve as you begin pinning closer to the bust dart. Work both pieces together at the curve and pin. Sew both pieces together and remove the needles as you're sewing. Always backstitch. Open and press the seams. The back bodice also has 2 pieces. Align the back pieces the same way the front was aligned, at a diagonal. You'll notice that the back side panel piece is also cut at a curve, so you're forcing both pieces together as you pin. Place the front and back pieces right sides together and pin only on the right side of the bodice. Sew and press the seams open. You probably noticed that I marked the bust dart of my bodice using wax paper. Since it's the lining of my dress, I really didn't pay much mind. However, if you're marking your actual garment, that's never a good idea. So I'm going to show you a different method. Find the halfway point of your dart legs and place a notch. Sew through the point of the dart, also known as the apex, and just before you snip the thread, make sure it's long enough. Do the same thing to the halfway point of the dart legs. Remove the pattern pieces very carefully, making sure the thread strands remain intact to the skirt. Pull the top layer of the skirt and snip the center of the thread. The goal is to keep a long enough strand to cut in between both pieces. Since I'm using the lining, I'm going to use a pencil to connect the points. If you're using the actual garment, make sure to use a water-soluble marker, pen or pencil. Hand baste the darts before using your sewing machine. Press the dart seams towards center back. Take the 2 back pieces and pin them right sides together. Sew the 2 center back pieces, leaving the vent open. Fold the pleats on the front of the skirt and pin in place. Place the front and back skirt right sides together and pin only on the right side, baste, and press the seams open. This is where we'll attach the bodice to the skirt. Starting from the side seam, begin matching the bodice panel seam to the center of the first pleat on the skirt. Match the center front and back. Once again, match the center of the pleat to the side panel seam. The back bodice panel seam to the back skirt dart. The front and back center lines, which is represented by the black threading. I opted to use a medium weight muslin, aka cotton, instead of the interfacing. The option is yours. You can easily iron on the interfacing, or else you're sewing the cotton onto the lining. Take the facing pieces, pin and stitch at the side seam. Match the facing to the bodice lining, pin and stitch in place. Okay, now let's go back to my actual dress. Before I attach the lining to the dress, I want to add on my decorative ribbon. Take the ribbon and line it up against the side seam opening. Make sure it's placed in between the waistline seam. You want the ribbon placed evenly around the waistband. Baste the ribbon in place using the same color thread. I'm using a white thread, which is going to be hidden within the ribbon pattern itself. Excluding the shoulder straps, match the dress and lining right sides together and pin along the top edge. Turn the dress over so that the lining is facing you. This is where detail matters the most. In order to get a beautiful sweetheart neckline, measure in your seam allowance from the top edge of the neckline and lightly mark the fabric using a colored pencil. Now you'll have a nice guideline to work with when you start sewing. Repeat this step to the back of the dress as well. Once you've sewn the lining to the dress, trim down the neckline to about 1/4 inch. Snip into the curves without going into the stitch line. A word of caution, make sure you're satisfied with the neckline before cutting away at the seam allowance. Repeat the same process to the armhole and the back of the dress. Now turn the dress to the right side. Use your finger, a point turner, or knitting needle and push the dress and lining strap so that both straps are on the wrong side of the dress. Now take the straps from the back of the bodice and push both through the same opening. You'll notice that the back bodice straps are sandwiched in between the front bodice straps. Notice how the dress straps are against one another, and how the lining straps are also lined up against each other. Now stitch all 4 pieces together. Trim the seam allowance to about 1/4 inch, press and pull the shoulder straps apart. Before steam pressing the sweetheart neckline, it's important to top stitch the lining about 1/8 inch from the top edge. Repeat the same step to the back as well. Steam press using a tailor's ham. I saved the bow for last because I wanted the neckline completed. Pin the ribbon in place and you'll notice that I'm only sewing through the dress, not through the dress and lining. I placed my hand inside the dress to prevent this from happening. Cut the ribbon ends at an angle. I've thread traced the side seam in preparation for the zipper. Please visit the link above on how to sew an invisible zipper. Once the zipper is sewn in place, the lining will give the dress a nice clean finish. Turn the dress inside out and pin the lining to the dress. You can also visit the link above on how to sew a lining. Thread trace the seam allowance on the skirt vent. Fold in the seam allowance and sew in about 3/8 of an inch. Use a temporary stitch to sew the skirt vent. Stitch close the top of the skirt vent as well. Clip into the seam allowance where the vent begins. Press the seams open. Place the ruler at a diagonal on the top of the vent and lightly draw a line. Thread base the marking. Using a permanent stitch, sew right through the thread basting. Remove the temporary stitches to see the vent. Steam press the vent to get a nice, crisp finish. The lining also has a vent, but we're going to sew up the skirt and trim away the excess. Mark 1 inch from the lining hem and trim away. Fold in 1/2 inch twice and stitch in place. Fold in 1/2 inch on the hem of the dress and stitch in place. Now fold the hem about 2 inches and hand baste. For more information on how to finish a hem, please view the link above. For pattern information and additional tips, please visit sweetmaterial.com. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.